All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Friday, February 7th, right here on your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and we have a fun episode for the people today. We are going to kind of preview the big game this weekend on the women's basketball side of things as Texas, the number 4 team in the country, takes on number 2 South Carolina in a redemption game. We will give a pretty deep, detailed preview going into that game, where these two teams line up nationally, and how much really an outlier that first matchup was, of it being completely as one-sided as it was. And so we'll kind of go over those numbers, and we'll discuss some things, and we'll do our absolute best to talk ourselves and to all the fans listening of Texas winning this game against South Carolina. We're going to do our best at it. So give a positive spin on the upcoming game. And then also a fun little, I don't know, I was just kind of reminiscing. You just get nostalgic from time to time. And I kind of decided, like, I'm going to make a list of the things that I liked better in the good old days of football that I grew up watching in the late 90s, early 2000s, whether that be college or NFL, just football in general, and compare it to, I do like some things in today's game that's better. I do. But there are also some other things where I'm just like, man, I really wish it was like the good old days. And so we're going to have that discussion. We'll go back and forth. I made a list. I believe Jake probably added some things. Maybe he added some things. I don't know, to that list. But anyway, Jake, it's Friday. Big plans over the weekend. Anything going on, man?
This weekend, not really, thankfully. Right now, I'm just I try to avoid doing anything on the weekends because it's full work mode. So hopefully the weather warms up a little and I can maybe get my smokers out. I need to clean them, and it's really hard to use the hose whenever it is 10 degrees outside.
Oh, well, we don't have that problem in Texas. It's like 75 this weekend.
Last night we actually got like an ice storm that I didn't even know we were supposed to get. And this morning I passed like 10 wrecks on my way to work.
That's awesome.
And had a nice thick layer of ice to scrape off my windows to start the day.
Yeah, no, it was actually kind of got a little warm to where I felt like I needed to take off my quarter zip and wear just my regular short sleeve polo to work today. So
yeah, that sounds real nice.
That's what I'm dealing with here. But no, Jake, I got so I've had the girlfriend's been out of town, and so I've got the kiddos. I'm gonna have the kiddos all next week as well as she trains for her job. And so I've been in single dad mode. And this weekend, I am already going to be exhausted. She will be in town this weekend, so we get to kind of hang out a little bit. But of course, my mom gets me to work and help her work a show that she's working on with her boutique, Presley Boutique. But hey, it's actually not the worst thing in the world. I may or may not be a photographer for models and having to take their pictures. So, I mean, it could be a worse way to spend the Saturday.
You will be the true stereotype of the creepy photographer.
I mean, hey, I'll take it. I mean, I get the pictures and then I get to edit them. I'm kidding. Just kidding. So, all right. Well, Jake, let's go ahead, dive into it. Let's talk about this basketball game coming up this weekend for the girls. On the women's side, again, number 4 Texas taking on South Carolina at South Carolina, trying to overcome and redeem the loss that they had earlier this year, where it was the worst loss, at least in Vic Schaefer's career at Texas, to my knowledge. And so let's kind of run through the numbers, Jake. First of all, immediate kind of like, without diving too much into it, surface level, what does Texas have to do to kind of right the wrong that they saw earlier in the year?
Well, not going like 2-21 in the first quarter would be a really solid start.
It'd be ideal.
And doing some things they did in the first game, mainly on the glass. They were dominating the glass. It's why they had so many more shots than South Carolina, especially in that first half, where you're looking at the halftime like, they have so many more shots off of extra opportunities, off of rebounds, and just keep missing it. And, just I think Madison Booker having a much better game is probably one of the biggest things. She had probably the worst game of her career, maybe at any level of her playing career, in that game, where she was rebounding really well. She was doing aspects of her game really well, but the ball wasn't going in the hoop. And if the ball doesn't go in the hoop, you don't win the game. And so for Texas, a lot of it's just going to come from shooting the ball better.
Yeah, I think just execution in general. I mean, and I've always said this. So this has kind of been my train of thought, is that like just making shots isn't good enough to be playing good offense. Like, you can make some shots just on a good night and you can have a good offensive performance. That doesn't mean you're playing good offense, but it's also the same factor the other way around of like, you can get open and you can be getting good looks and the offense be creating open opportunities for your scorers to make plays, and you're just not hitting your shots and things just aren't going in. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing bad offense, but it doesn't mean you're playing good offense either, because at the end of the day, the ball does have to go through the hoop for it to actually matter. So I think if you combine those two things for Texas, like you said, just making your shots that you're accustomed to making and not feeling, I don't know, was it some sort of SEC first big SEC game pressure of, defending champion, South Carolina, or, did that have a play into the first game? I don't know. We don't know, but maybe it did. And maybe they're just kind of calmed down and settled the nerves, and they're further into the SEC season, and they're, top 3 team in the conference. And so they should be feeling pretty confident at this point in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back at the box score from the first game. I forgot just how ridiculous it was.
It was pretty bad.
Texas shot 79 shots to South Carolina's 51 and made less.
That's just
they had 20 offensive rebounds to South Carolina's 6 offensive rebounds. They had 10 steals to South Carolina's 5, only 12 turnovers to South Carolina's 22. Yeah. They just couldn't shoot the basketball. I mean, they were 1 of 5 from 3, which that's not many 3 shots, so that's not too big. 5 of 10 from the free throw line. That's not good enough.
And Texas isn't a 3-point shooting team, so I don't expect them to. Yeah,
no. And in South Carolina, it was only 3 of 7. Neither one of these teams is going to be shooting a ton of 3-pointers, but it's pretty simple when you look back at that first game. Texas just has to make buckets.
Yeah.
Because they played really well in every other aspect of that game, had way less turnovers, dominated the glass, and just, it doesn't matter when you dominate the glass if the putbacks aren't going in. And so
if you're Angel Reesing it, and it's not really going to matter. So
you're going to get someone upset with that one.
And that's okay. Everyone's going to be upset about something eventually. Assist to turnover ratio, Jake, where these two teams match up nationally. Texas is number 18 in the country. South Carolina, number 14 in the country. So again, your assist to TO ratio isn't necessarily going to win you or lose you this. I mean, it can win you or lose you this game if it's not a good performance. But in terms of what these teams are accustomed to doing, neither one really has an advantage in that category. Shooting percentage, Texas number 8 in the country compared to South Carolina number 16 in the country. Texas is shooting overall on offense 48% from the field. South Carolina 47%. So again, like you mentioned, an anomaly of sorts in that first matchup. Just something very uncharacteristic of this Texas team to shoot such a poor performance. Now, defensively, South Carolina is better than Texas. South Carolina is the number 6 team in the country in terms of defensive shooting percentage. They force their teams that they play against to shoot a much lower percentage. Texas definitely did in that first game. Texas number 94 in the country, only allowing 38.9% from the field against them. Rebound margin, Texas is number 6 in the country, South Carolina number 19. So Texas has the advantage on the rebounding situation. They had the advantage in the first time these two teams matched up. 3-point percentage, again, these two teams are not 3-point shooting teams. SC is number 80 in the country, shooting about 33, a little over 33%. Texas at 30.1% from beyond the arc. That's good for a solid 222nd in the country. So again, not something that they're going to be really honing in on. And then scoring offense in general, Jake, just all around offense. Texas number 6 in the country, South Carolina number 15. Scoring defense, Texas is number 33, South Carolina number 26. So a little bit better of a defensive team as South Carolina, a little bit better of an offensive team as Texas. And again, that didn't show at all in the first game. And so I imagine, kind of proving your point, I wanted to bring those stats up to say, I do believe that game was as much of a fluke as it possibly could have been. I'm not saying South Carolina isn't the better team or couldn't win that game if Texas plays their A game. I'm just saying Texas's performance was a fluke, and I don't expect it to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably pick South Carolina to win, but just in a close game. I expect this
It's
game
also
to
at
be
home this time
yeah.
for South Carolina.
I expect this to be a much closer contest. You know, I'd be surprised if the women come out and just lay another egg because really they played well in a lot of aspects of that game, like we've discussed. They just got to shoot it better, and I just don't believe that they will have that bad of a shooting game again. And South Carolina deserves some credit for that, but I did watch a good amount of that game, and Texas was just missing shots inside as well.
Yeah.
A lot after putbacks, which is why the offensive rebound number was so high. And so my kind of prediction or thought of this game is it's going to be much tighter contest throughout. Both teams will probably have some runs, and Texas may lose, but in a close game. But I could see Texas winning this game as well. I think they're going to come out highly motivated because of that first game. I think they're going to play much better. And I think at the very least, this is going to be a much more competitive contest from start to finish.
And Jake, let's go ahead and give some predictions here, and then we'll move on to our next topic and wrap up the show. I've got Texas. I want to pick them to win. I really do. I've gone back and forth with this. It really was weighing on my mind today as before we were going to record. And so I'm thinking I really want to take Texas to win this game, but I think South Carolina is going to come away with it towards the end. Give them an 8-point win, 68-60. I'll take South Carolina to win, a lot of those coming in free throws in the final seconds of the game.
Yeah, I think I have South Carolina. I'm going to go with 66-63.
Yeah.
Very close game. Texas will lead for long portions of the game. So will South Carolina. It'll be the home court advantage that kind of takes it home. I
think
imagine
they get a
it's
little
going to
bit of
be
momentum in the fourth quarter.
I imagine it's going to be a pretty good environment in this game. And it just kind of matters how
they're not going
Texas
to their men's
comes out.
basketball games. So, I mean, there's not much else.
That is true.
Not much else to do on that campus. So,
yeah,
but,
it's going to be rocking, and it'll be a good environment. But A&M, as you would expect, packed the gym for that game, and it didn't matter. South Carolina is obviously a much better women's basketball team, much better athletic program than A&M. But Texas will come out, I think, more ready to play. I wouldn't be surprised if they're leading after the first quarter by 4 to 6 points.
Yeah.
Close to a tied game at halftime, then it's back and forth, and then just a late momentum swing will bring it out for South Carolina. But we'll be feeling in a good spot as far as for this women's team moving forward.
I'm also a big fan of Coach Don Stanley or Staley. Is it Staley or Stanley?
You're putting me on the spot.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But I always get it mixed up, whichever one it is. I think it's Don Staley. But I'm a big fan of hers when it comes to how she prepares her team and seeing the
Don Staley.
Staley. See, I knew what I was talking about the first time. I should have never questioned it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of what she does with this women's program. She has an all-male practice squad to go against her girls in practice. And a lot of them are like athletic trainers, or they played at a very high level in high school basketball. They're just not good enough to play Division I SEC basketball, which is perfectly fine. That doesn't mean they're not good players. And so she has put together about 5 to 6 guys that are on their athletic training staff to scrimmage her girls throughout the season and kind of not only get them acclimated to the strength of that level, but the speed as well. And so I always thought her approach to coaching her girls was very well done. And I was been impressed with her since her tenure started at South Carolina.
Yeah, it would be impossible not to be. The body of work that she's done there speaks for itself.
All right, Jake, well, let's go ahead. And I want to flip the script a little bit in our topic today. Then we're going to wrap things up. We're already halfway through it. And so this can be about a 10-minute conversation, or it could be a 30-minute conversation. I'm not entirely sure where this is going to go. But I felt a little nostalgic today. I was watching old highlights, and I was watching, old games and seeing how the game has shifted so dramatically, whether that's college football or professional football. And at the NFL level, the game from 20 years ago is completely different. If I had told you 20 years ago what college football would look like today, you would have slapped me with a dead animal and called me crazy. Like, you would have just ran me out of town. Like, there's no way you would have believed me if I said NIL, transfer portal, 12-team playoff, Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC, Oregon and USC, UCLA, or they're all in the Big Ten. The Big 12 and ACC are essentially irrelevant whenever you talk about, top four, Power Four conference leagues, and all the things that surround college football today, and then especially even the NFL as well. So I was kind of reminiscing. I jotted down some notes, Jake. First one I want to talk about, man, the violence of the game has changed so much. There used to be this Warriors mentality of, like, even whenever you watched movies like The Longest Yard, or you watched, Any Given Sunday, whatever it was, like, and I know those are fictional movies, but it would be how fun is it to think that you had these just like brute warriors on the other side of you, legitimately trying to kill you. They weren't friendly. They weren't asking for autographs after the game. They weren't chit-chatting on social media following the game. They weren't buddy, hanging out together, following a loss to each other and asking for autographs and jersey swaps and things like that. It felt like a different mentality where, like, yeah, the teams had rivalry, but the players also didn't like each other during any game. And so I think I feel like the way the game, there's a lot more sportsmanship. And again, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes I just miss a linebacker who's wearing a dark visor and shoulder pads over his helmet, trying to take a wide receiver's head off while he's trying to streak over the middle of the field and it not be a flag.
I do think teams still don't like each other. The vast majority of the time in big games.
Yeah. And we saw, obviously we saw how many rivalry fights broke out because of flag planting this last season. Like, obviously there's still some animosity to your opponent.
Yeah, I still think there's a lot, especially at the college game. I would complain about that more at the NFL level than I would at the college level. But for me, I think one of the biggest things is just how slanted the rules are to the offense now.
Right.
That kind of plays into what you're saying, because it touches on the physicality standpoint. But just in general, playing defense now looks impossible. Because of all the different rules, and not just the hitting.
You can't play corner anymore. You're so limited, or actually you're more abused on the defensive line in terms of the lack of holding penalties that are called, the lack of false starts, the advantages that they are giving the offensive linemen in the rule book in today's game.
I don't have a problem with that.
I know you don't. You don't.
I have a problem with how holding is called, because half the time holding is called, it's not holding. And then it's just not called against edge rushers, like, who just get their jerseys pulled off.
The only ones that get a holding penalty are defensive tackles or linebackers
on run plays, and most of the time it's an insignificant hold, yet you'll have an edge getting his jersey torn off that would get a sack, and they don't call that a hold. Yeah. And then the edge rusher puts his hand just on the shoulder pad of the quarterback, and it's a roughing the passer.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Hands to the face. If I had even told you 20 years ago, hey, Jake, hands to the face is going to be a separate penalty than a face mask. Face mask and hands to the face are two different things. You would look at me, your 12-year-old self would look at me and say, Tanner, you're a bleeping moron. And I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. But it's just the way that the rule book has adjusted kind of this and encouraged defenses to lay off on offenses is wild to me. Like, it's so crazy. Like, I'm trying to prevent you from doing anything, of getting a yard, of catching the ball, of scoring a touchdown. And the entire rule book seems to be against me. So I'm just going to kind of lay off and not do some of those things.
Yeah. I'm going to take one on here that you put, because you you got to put everything first, so you got to take the good
That's
ones.
fine. Yeah.
I actually work right now, so I'm busy. That's my
Okay.
excuse.
It's a
But
small job. Oh,
grass,
grass.
because this is one of the first ones I think of.
Grass.
Because when I played, I hated playing on turf. As a lineman, you hate it. The traction is just worse than playing
Mhm.
on grass. And now you are starting to see a shift back towards grass. Texas is going to be going back to grass. I think within the next 2 years. Texas has obviously done so many different renovations that grass is one of the things that got put a few years later, but it's still been on Del Conte's radar as one
Mhm.
of the things that needs to be done. It will be done, and I can't wait for DKR to be grass again. It's going to be beautiful. But just players playing on it typically don't like it better.
And
And
now you're starting to get all the ligament injuries, the ACLs, the studies behind that, the science behind it of putting more force on your body while playing on turf than you do on grass.
yeah, the injuries thing is obviously the obvious part about it. Because you do have players who just
But what's wrong with a good old mud stain on the jersey?
it looks great. And then you get the paint from like
Yeah.
the logo and
Yeah,
on
you
the
get
middle field, the end zones.
yeah, you get a red and a blue spot on a defender, and you're
You
like,
got
how the heck did that
you got
happen?
green marks all over your jersey.
Yeah.
It makes you feel good as a player when you see your jersey and your helmet
And
just
then you got the
all
kicker out there, and he's in pristine white, and you're like, what are you even
yeah.
doing? You
The only
know?
thing you get from turf that's extra on your jersey is typically blood because you get more cut up on
Yeah.
turf. You
Yeah.
just I'm not even joking about that. You just do. Now turf's gotten better than it used to be, so that happens less, but still, grass is just it's better in every way. It's better as a lineman. I think majority of linemen would agree that they like grass more. I think the
Yeah.
only people who might like
Maybe
turf
receiver.
more is like wide receiver because
Yeah.
you're a little bit faster on turf. Like you're definitely faster on turf, but
Mhm.
the ability to even running backs, I think would for the most part would like grass more just because that ability to cut
To
when
cut.
needed, just more traction, uh, and just easier to do it. And for like linemen, you can get a little bit longer cleats
Yeah. Well,
and
that
they
and
just dig in.
yeah, and there's another thing to that too, Jake, is like I feel like weather games is affected a little bit more with natural grass than you do with turf. And I think, there's a different level of hey, I'm going to let the grass just grow out slightly longer and slow the team down that we're playing against because they're a little bit faster than we are. And so we're just going to grow out the grass a little bit longer, keep it long, and try to slow them down a little. That's what Penn State did against Ohio State. It looked like they were playing in a field.
Teams do it. High school teams do that.
Yeah.
Who
So
was
there's a
it I played?
strategy. There's ways you can manipulate your field to try to gain an advantage. Like grass is an important part of the game.
We played a game at I think it was Lake Whitney my senior year, and it might have been a scrimmage. Their grass was the longest freaking grass I'd ever seen. It was like even as a lineman, I was like, man, it like makes you slower. And
Uh-huh.
as a lineman saying that, it was the slowest game of football I was ever a part of. Like it probably looked like a JV speed out
Yeah.
there
And
with
and
the
and
level that we
they
were
wanted to go
playing
out
at.
there and play tush push football.
Yeah, we ran the ball a lot. Like we literally threw the ball less in that game because of the coaches they're like, I guess they didn't cut the grass in the last month. He's like, I guess they thought we had burners at wide receiver. We're gonna run the football,
Yeah.
and that was what we did. Ran the football over and over. It can teams do that, like you said. Penn State did it, and it just brings another aspect of how's the field going to play
Yeah,
today because it's a real
exactly.
thing. Changes the speed of the game.
100%. And Jake, I miss the aesthetic of I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but man, LaDainian Tomlinson with the dark visor. I was looking up pictures, dude. I was looking up pictures of Colt Brennan. Y'all remember Colt Brennan at Hawaii, the quarterback? And he had like the sweet dark visor and the full like face mask that kind of looked like a running back. And he had like wristbands on and armbands. And the dude was like the definition of a creative player on NCAA. And he's out there in the Heisman race playing for Hawaii. But yeah, and then I just miss like big shoulder pads and like the penny jersey. Heck, when Vince Young played, they had the tearaway penny jerseys. I mean, you go back and look at that national championship, like, God, those are some old looking jerseys, which is sad to say because it's like, okay, it's time for us to get another picture a little bit more updated than that. But yeah, dude, I used to I love the look of an old football, game. It looked gritty. It looked kind of unkept and unclean.
And I did like not all teams go, and I'm glad Texas doesn't, but going the Oregon route of like, we're going to have like, it's not so cool when every team does it. And then a lot of them are just like, let's do gray alternates, like Iowa State doing their gray stuff.
Yeah.
It looks awful.
Gray.
Baylor does it. Like tons of schools do it. And it looks terrible. Actually, the SEC is pretty traditional jersey wise.
For the most part, they don't go crazy on the jerseys. SEC schools don't need crazy jerseys to recruit. And for the most part. But yeah, dude, I like the old school kind of vintage. I want football to look like football, and sometimes it's not pretty. We've turned it into such a pretty game. I miss the grittiness and griminess of the game of football.
Yeah, it all kind of goes together. When you have the pretty uniforms, you have the kind of, it's all sleek looking, and then you don't have the big hits as much. And when you do, everyone's going, that guy needs kicked out. And it's like now the game has like trained fans to want someone kicked out when there's a slightly big hit. But yet offensive players can target.
Yeah.
Which is always wild to me. We have seen in blocks targeting, like directly, like without a doubt targeting coming from an offensive player, and it'll never be called because it's only a role for defensive players, which plays into what I said of it looks impossible to play defense now because every role is against them and for the offense.
Yeah. There used to be a intimidation factor to playing defense, and you were able to kind of make the offensive players kind of regret making the choice that they did in terms of running over the middle of the field, or at least let them second guess it the next time they have to do it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, Jake, any other ones you want to throw out there that you can think of?
I think that's like a pretty good list. I mean, I think we kind of touched on it, but just like, the new mega conferences thing isn't as cool, especially the Big Ten. Having an
I just like it. My biggest thing is not the amount of teams, but which I do like there being a smaller amount because then everybody gets to play everybody in their conference, and you don't get to miss out on not playing in Alabama or not playing in Georgia or trying to sneak through some of the big games. But regional conferences would be my last thing. That or just stop messing with them. Can we not realign anymore? Can we just keep with what we have for just a moment? Like, let's breathe for a second. But I do miss regional conferences where it made sense of where the conference was located. Was within a, couple 100-mile radius, and that was about it. It felt like. Yeah.
Like the Oregon being in the Big Ten, like Texas and like the SEC is probably the conference that makes the most sense for the most part. I mean, it's all Southern schools basically, but like Oregon being in the Big Ten, you have like Arizona State in the Big 12 is weird. Like the Pac-12 getting dissolved is really the one that
West Virginia being in the Big 12 was so strange to me. Like, even in Iowa State doesn't really fit in, but you did have at one point in time Missouri and Kansas and all those teams, that Colorado, that were also in the Big 12. So it kind of made it a little bit more bearable. But when West Virginia joined, I was like, now UCF is in. It's like, okay, what are we doing with UCF in Cincinnati and the Big 12?
Yeah. You just have schools from East Coast all the way up north.
It's crazy.
In the same conferences.
No consistency. Nothing makes sense. My OCD,
it can't be fun as a player having to make that many long trips.
And if your family doesn't get to watch you nearly as much as they once were able to, going to an away game that was only a couple hour drive. Now it's across the country essentially. So, but anyway, we just wanted to have a little bit of fun on this episode. That came up in my brain today. And so I figured, hey, I might as well do a show about it. But that's going to do it for our episode, Jake. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and subscribe. Our numbers continue to grow. They're looking better, but we know we can do better, and we want your input on telling us on how to do better. And so please leave a comment, interact with the show, let us know what you want to hear from us, and we will do our absolute best to provide that to you. And for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All in Horns. Hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.